So today I want to tell you about a book, an excellent book, called Burying the Typewriter by Carmen Bugan, B-U-G-A-N. It won't be a spoiler if I tell you what it's about, because she actually starts her memoir by describing what it's about and what happens by the end. So I'll tell you first how I came to discover this writer and this memoir. Carmen and I were scheduled, just as pure coincidence, to read for the Geneva Writers Group back to back. She actually went before I did, which made my novel feel really ridiculous to be presenting after such an important and true piece of writing as this one. The title, Burying the Typewriter, refers to the way her father had to actually bury the typewriter that his family owned, completely registered and legally stamped many times over. He buried it in the garden, hid it away, and then had it back out again in order to write some politically controversial anti-communist pieces during the Ceausescu regime. His behavior landed him in prison for 12 years, solitary confinement, and put Carmen's entire family under 24/7 surveillance. They weren't even allowed to close their curtains at night. And it's a remarkable story of survival, and beautifully written as well, and strangely uplifting, I would say. Real privilege to have met her and to have encountered her writing as a result of that. This is a beautiful book. The colors that they've chosen for the cover are fantastic. I have sort of a rule that I like to not mark in a hardback book, but I lasted 10 pages before I had to actually mark something, and I want to read you that. I was asked the other day, to me, what makes a good book. It's a very open question. And the first thing I said, surprising myself a little bit when I answered, was I think the writing needs to be accessible. I think it should also be beautiful in a way that's unique and original, but I don't want to have to work too hard before I gain understanding. And I would say that Carmen's writing is exactly that. It is very accessible, even with some Romanian words that were unfamiliar to me before reading this, and remain unfamiliar to me, I should say. But there's absolute beauty in her writing, too. She's also a poet, and I'm eager to read her poetry, too. So check out just this one short paragraph. By the way, the book is basically about her childhood, which began as a very innocent, loving, happy childhood in Romania, basically a life of peasants in Romania, and then continued through the difficulties of the family under surveillance. So, and then continues out the other side, too, where in many ways I would call it a happy ending. Although it isn't fully ended, and it certainly isn't fully happy. But, page 10, she's a little girl. My favorite ritual is to collect the eggs from the hens. They are brown and warm, and I have to reach into the hay under the hens' bottoms, which makes them chuckle pleasantly. They are used to my disturbing them in the mornings and the evenings. When it's time for making chicks in the spring, Bunica brings all the eggs in the willow basket to the kitchen table, and we look inside them with a lamp, letting the light filter through the yolk to see if there are babies in there. Those eggs we take back to the nests so the hens can sit on them until baby chicks peck their way out. I'm fascinated by this. When Bunica says it's happening, I go and watch forever until the shell begins to crack and pieces of it fall on the grass, revealing a tiny beak, and then the chick, astonished with life. They are fuzzy and furry, the little chicks, all bright yellow. They fit in my cupped hands. Love that line. I think that if you know my writing, I'm very interested in synesthesia right now and color association, and I think Carmen and I may have a few things in common. She writes sensory description beautifully, and color plays a big part of it, which I love. There's a scene that I think is really important in terms of her role in the world as a writer, and it's an early sign of something that she experiences in the church that I wanted to read next. She's a little bit older, and she says, My grandparents take us to the priest's candle, and we light ours from it. I don't know what I feel. Maybe a sensation that I'm suddenly far inside time, capital T, time. There are tears streaming from my face. This is the first time in my life when collective emotion, a sort of light, pulses through me, and I understand that something bigger than me is happening, some kind of unity. Everyone smiles, and then hundreds of candles are lit. I feel like that really, right there, encapsulates the metaphor for her father's work and for Carmen's work and their lives, and it harkens back to that little metaphor that, or scene that I read a minute ago about the light looking through for the babies in the egg yolk. There is so much beauty in this book that it's astonishing. And it's very honest, which is a different thing from being truthful. Especially with fiction, there are different levels of that, but I think there's a real bravery and courage in the way Carmen has put this story together, put it on paper, and is presenting her family's situation to the world with a blend of pride and trepidation, and she discusses openly the humiliation of growing up the way she did under surveillance and being social pariahs in a very fearful community. She's going to see her father, and she says, this is when she's a teen, and I am nervous about seeing Dad, partly because I want to support him, partly because I want to reproach him for branding my name like this without asking me if I wanted to be known for his troubles with the government. There is just a tiny sentence that, in a nutshell, explains what her upbringing was all about in Burying the Typewriter. This is at the very end of the book, before we get to some of the annotations that she's able to put in after the Securitat opened her father's files, her family's files. But again, it's not really a spoiler, because I think you know by when you start the book that her father does survive his prison sentence. My father spent a total of 12 years in the worst Romanian prisons and forced labor camps because he praised the democratic values of the West while openly criticizing the structure and philosophy of communism. The book goes through so many things that are so difficult to read and eye-opening, and yet it feels like an old friend introducing me to her background. I suppose in a way that's because I met her before I met her writing, but I honestly believe you will know her very well just by reading her writing. And now that I've read her memoir, I can't wait to check out her poetry, because that PhD at Oxford was something she absolutely deserved, I can tell. She's just a stunning writer, and this is an incredibly important and enjoyable book to read. Burying the Typewriter, Carmen Bugan. Enjoy.